Are you ready to journey back to a time of grand castles, shining knights, and terribly awkward romantic gestures? Time when a single song beneath a moonlit window could either win a heart or ensure a lifetime of ridicule. What if the knight was less charming troubadour and more bumbling bard? How did hopeful lovers navigate the treacherous waters of medieval courtship, especially when their musical talents or their luck utterly failed them? Prepare yourself for the most uncomfortable moments from a bygone era as we uncover the 7 most cringe-worthy medieval serenade fails. Number 7. The unfortunate animal intervention. The air above the manor of Lord Beaumont was still, save for the rustle of leaves in the cool evening breeze. Sir Kaelen, a young knight, with a heart full of yearning and a lute he barely knew how to play, stood hidden beneath a gnarled oak tree. His gaze was fixed on a solitary unlit window on the 2nd floor, the bedchamber of Lady Elara. She was known for her beauty and her sharp wit, and Kaelen, who had recently joined Lord Beaumont's retinue, was determined to capture her attention. He had spent the entire afternoon practicing a simple chanson, a tune about undying devotion and the sorrow of a distant admirer, a common theme in the courtly love literature that circulated through the noble houses of the 13th century. He had even managed to memorize the words, though the melody still felt like a tangle in his fingers. Kaelen took a deep breath, adjusted the worn leather strap of his lute, and began to pluck the strings. The first few notes wobbled, a shaky beginning to what he hoped would be a stirring performance. His voice, surprisingly clear despite his nervousness, began to carry the words of the chanson. "O fairest bloom, my heart's true desire," he sang, his eyes still fixed on the window. He imagined Lady Elara perhaps stirring from her slumber or pausing from her evening embroidery to listen to his earnest plea. A soft glow from inside the room might appear, a sign that she acknowledged his presence. Such clandestine serenades were not uncommon, a delicate dance between propriety and passion, often documented in collections of troubadour songs from the south of France or the Minnesänger tradition in the Germanic lands. Just as he reached the 2nd verse, a low grunting sound rumbled from the thicket nearby. Kaelen faltered, his fingers slipping on the lute strings, producing a discordant twang. He paused, his heart thumping against his ribs. He squinted into the deepening shadows, trying to identify the source of the noise. It came again, louder this time, accompanied by a distinct snuffling sound. A wild boar, large and shaggy, its tusks gleaming faintly in the dim light, lumbered out of the undergrowth, attracted perhaps by the unusual sound or simply on its nightly foraging path. The beast stopped, its small dark eyes fixing on Kaelen and his strange strumming contraption. The boar snorted, a deep guttural sound that seemed to echo through the quiet night. Kaelen froze, his lute still clutched in his hands, considered bolting. But the boar seemed more curious than aggressive. Then, as if sensing the knight's apprehension, the boar let out a piercing squeal, a sound that ripped through the quiet manor grounds. This was not the gentle lament of a lover. This was the shriek of a startled, possibly annoyed, wild beast. The sound was so unexpected, so jarring, that Kaelen accidentally dropped his lute. It hit the ground with a dull thud, the strings vibrating mournfully. The boar, seemingly satisfied with its disruption, snorted again and then turned trotting off into the darkness, leaving Kaelen alone in the sudden silence. But the silence did not last. A window above, not Lady Elara's but one belonging to a particularly grumpy guard, creaked open. "Who's making that racket down there?" a gruff voice demanded, followed by the clanking of metal as the guard, likely Sir Reginald, peered out. A torch held aloft, the flickering light cast long dancing shadows. Kaelen, mortified, quickly bent to retrieve his lute, hoping to escape detection. But the torchlight caught him, illuminating his crimson face and the awkward broken posture. The guard let out a hearty laugh. "Sir Kaelen serenading the boars now? Are we, or has your instrument decided to mate with the local wildlife?" He guffawed, the sound carrying easily across the courtyard. Within moments, other windows began to open, and sleepy, curious faces appeared. Servants, roused by the commotion, peered from the kitchen doors. Lord Beaumont himself, a man who valued his peace above all else, could be heard grumbling from his chamber. Lady Elara's window remained dark. Kaelen, his face burning, mumbled an apology to the chuckling guard, grabbed his lute and fled into the night, the boar's squeal and the guard's laughter ringing in his ears. His serenade had not reached the heart of his lady, but it had certainly roused the entire manor, ensuring that his romantic aspirations would be the subject of hushed and not so hushed jokes for weeks to come. Number 6. The Wrong Window Fiasco. Evening mist clung to the cobblestones of the bustling mercantile city of Ghent. Young Master Godefroy, a wool merchant's son with aspirations far beyond bales of fleece, paced nervously beneath the imposing stone walls of the House of Vanderwell. His target was Lady Annelise, the daughter of a prominent guild master, known for her delicate beauty and her sharp, independent mind. Godefroy, though not of noble birth, believed his wealth and his artistic sensibilities. He fancied himself a poet, and a musician would be enough to win her favor. He had painstakingly composed a ballad, a complex piece with several verses, describing his love as a river flowing ceaselessly to the sea, a common metaphor found in the lyrical poetry of the Flemish Golden Age. He had even hired a skilled rebec player, a man named Peter, to accompany him, as his own musical talents were frankly limited. Peter tuned his rebec, its two strings producing a haunting, slightly nasal tone, typical of the medieval fiddle. Godefroy adjusted his velvet cloak, a recent extravagance, and cleared his throat. He had carefully scouted the house earlier in the day, identifying what he believed to be Lady Annelise's chamber window. It was on the second floor, adorned with intricate leaded glass, and positioned to catch the morning sun. He had heard from a servant, paid handsomely for information, that Lady Annelise often read by that very window in the afternoons. He assumed, therefore, that it was her sleeping quarters. The meticulous planning, a hallmark of any successful merchant, had given him a false sense of security. "Are you certain this is the correct window, Master Godefroy?" Pieter whispered, his rebec tucked under his chin. "The house is vast, and many windows look alike." Godefroy waved a dismissive hand. "Of course, Pieter. I saw her there myself, only this afternoon. Begin when I give the signal." Pieter shrugged, accustomed to the whims of his patrons, and began to play a soft, melancholic introduction. Godefroy took a deep breath and began to sing, his voice a little strained with emotion but sincere. "My love, a stream finds its true sea in thee," he warbled, gazing up at the dark, silent window, convinced that his profound words were piercing the gloom and reaching the heart of his beloved. As the second verse began, a light appeared in the window. Godefroy's heart swelled. She was there. She was listening. A shadowy figure moved behind the glass. He poured more emotion into his voice, his gestures becoming more dramatic, a common performance style influenced by wandering minstrels who entertained at fairs and feasts. Pieter, caught up in the moment, played with more vigor, the rebec's notes soaring into the cool night. Suddenly, the window creaked open, and a voice, loud and booming, cut through the night. "What in the name of St. Nicholas is going on down there?" The voice was decidedly not Lady Annelise's. It was deep, gruff, and filled with the indignation of a man whose sleep had been abruptly shattered. Godefroy froze his mouth open mid-word, his song dying on his lips. The shadowy figure leaned out of the window, its outline becoming clearer in the faint light filtering from within the room. It was not Lady Annelise. It was her elder brother, Master Henrik van der Velde, a man known throughout Ghent for his short temper and his formidable build. He was still clad in his nightshirt, a rather unflattering garment, and his hair was wildly disheveled. Henrik squinted down at the two figures, his eyes widening in recognition. "Godefroy, is that you, you bullen nuisance, serenading my bedchamber? Are you mad?" His voice resonated through the narrow street, echoing off the surrounding buildings. Godefroy stammered, trying to formulate an apology to explain his egregious error. "Master Henrik, I did not mean I believed this to be." He gestured vaguely at the window, his face a mask of utter mortification. Peter, the rebec player, quickly lowered his instrument and began to back away slowly, hoping to become invisible in the shadows. From a window on the floor above, a faint light appeared, and a delicate feminine face peered out. Lady Annelise. She had indeed been disturbed by the commotion, but she had wisely chosen to observe from a safer distance. Her eyes, wide with surprise, darted between her enraged brother and the flustered Master Godefroy below. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, quickly replaced by an expression of polite amusement. She quickly withdrew, likely to share the scandalous tale with her maids. Master Henrik, still fuming, leaned further out the window. "Return to your looms, Master Godefroy, and do not darken my family's windows with your wretched caterwauling again." He slammed the window shut with a resounding thud, the sound reverberating through the silent street. Godefroy, utterly humiliated, mumbled apologies to the retreating PA, then scurried away into the dark alleys, his grand romantic gesture having crashed and burned in the most spectacular fashion. His reputation in Ghent, particularly among the van der Velde household, was now inextricably linked with the image of a bewildered young man singing a love song to a disgruntled brother. Number 5. The poetry plagiarism panic. In the court of Duke Antoine in Normandy, Sir Julian was a knight of middling skill but boundless ambition. He had set his sights on Lady Isolde, a woman of refined tastes and a particular fondness for eloquent poetry, a common affectation among the noblewomen of the mid-12th century, influenced by the burgeoning troubadour movement. Julian, however, possessed a mind more attuned to the clang of steel than the meter of verse. He knew his own words would fall flat, so he hatched a plan. He would present a serenade of unparalleled beauty, one that surely would win Isolde's heart. He acquired, for a hefty sum, a scroll containing several original poems, written by a renowned troubadour from Aquitaine, Master Arnaud's reputation was legendary, his verses known for their intricate rhyme schemes and profound expressions of devotion. Julian, however, failed to consider the vast reach of Master Arnaud's fame. The chosen night was clear and cool, a perfect setting for romance. Julian, clad in his finest tunic, took his position beneath Isolde's chamber window, carried a small ornate lute, though he had wisely chosen to hire a professional musician, a quiet man named Pierre, to handle the actual playing. Julian cleared his throat, unfurled the scroll, and began to recite. His voice, though not melodic, was deep and earnest. "From distant lands my weary heart does yearn, for thee, my son, where true light doth burn," he recited, his eyes fixed on the silhouetted window. The words, so obviously not his own, flowed smoothly, each line a masterpiece of courtly devotion. Pierre's lute accompaniment was subtle and elegant, creating a perfect backdrop. Julian continued, poem after poem, each more beautiful than the last. He felt a surge of confidence. Surely Isolde would be moved by such sublime artistry. He was halfway through a particularly poignant stanza, a description of the lover's suffering, a popular theme in troubadour poetry, where anguish proved the depth of feeling, when a window on the floor above Lady Isolde's opened. A figure leaned out, silhouetted against the inner light of the room. It was Sir Gauthier, a rival knight, who also harbored feelings for Lady Isolde. Gauthier, a man of letters himself, was known for his vast collection of scrolls and his encyclopedic knowledge of contemporary poetry. Gauthier cleared his throat loudly. "Ah, Sir Julian," he called down, his voice dripping with mock admiration. "Truly exquisite performance. I particularly enjoyed the part about the golden threads of sorrow woven through the soul. Such a unique turn of phrase." Julian froze, his heart plummeting. He recognized the line. It was from the poem he was currently reciting. Gauthier continued, "Is that the new collection by Master Arnaud of Aquitaine? He truly is a master, isn't he? I believe that particular piece is called The Lament of the Lone Cypress, isn't it?" Gauthier's voice was sharp, cutting through the night like a honed blade. Julian stammered, his face blanching. I merely drew inspiration." His words trailed off, a pathetic attempt at a recovery. Pierre, sensing the disaster, stopped playing, his fingers hovering over the lute strings. Below, the curtains at Lady Isolde's window twitched, and a faint sound, perhaps a stifled giggle, reached Julian's ears. The direct public accusation of plagiarism was a grave insult, especially in a court that valued originality and skill. To claim another's artistic work as one's own was seen as a mark of dishonesty and a lack of true worth. Gauthier continued his scathing commentary. "Indeed, Sir Julian, it takes a certain kind of courage to present another man's profound expression of love as your own, especially when the original is so widely known, even here in Normandy." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. "Perhaps next time you might compose your own verses, even if they are as crude as a peasant's lament. At least they would be genuine." With that final, devastating jab, Gauthier retreated, closing his window with a soft click. Julian stood rooted to the spot, the scroll clutched in his trembling hand, could still hear the faint, muffled sounds of laughter from within Lady Isolde's chamber. His grand serenade, intended to display his depth of feeling, had instead revealed his superficiality and his deceit. He had not only failed to impress Lady Isolde, but he had also made a public spectacle of himself, confirming Gauthier's reputation as a man of intellect and Julian's as a hollow pretender. The following days were filled with whispered jokes and pointed references to Master Arnaud's poetry, every mention a fresh sting. His pursuit of Lady Isolde ended that very night, replaced by a lingering sense of public shame. Number 4. The Misunderstood Message. In the bustling city of Bruges, a hub of trade and cultural exchange in the 14th century, lived young Willem, a wealthy merchant's son, with a keen intellect but a remarkably poor understanding of nuanced social cues. He had fallen deeply, desperately in love with Lady Mathilde, a noblewoman known for her gentle demeanor and her devout faith. Willem, eager to express the depth of his devotion, decided upon a serenade. However, instead of a traditional love song, he chose a plam, a type of lamentation song commonly sung by troubadours to mourn the death of a beloved lord or patron, or to express deep grief over a lost love. He believed its profound sadness and complex melody would perfectly convey the suffering he endured in his unrequited love, a trope he had read about in several courtly romance manuscripts. He misunderstood that plans were not typically used for initial romantic overtures. On a moonless night, Willem, accompanied by a solitary viol player, stood beneath Lady Mathilde's window. The viol, a medieval stringed instrument, produced a rich, resonant sound. Willem had chosen a particularly somber plan, one filled with mournful phrases about absence, despair, and a longing for something lost forever. He began to sing, his voice trembling with manufactured sorrow. "O vanished joy, where art thou fled?" he crooned, his eyes gazing dramatically upwards. "My heart, a tomb where hope lies dead." The viol player, a master of his craft, produced heart-wrenching melodies, his bow weeping across the strings. Willem continued, detailing a sorrow so profound it bordered on the despair of a lost soul. He sang of ashes of dreams, shadows of light, and the cold embrace of endless night. He thought he was painting a picture of intense, passionate suffering for Lady Mathilde, demonstrating his extreme devotion. After all, the more one suffered, the more truly one loved. Or so the romantic text suggested. He ended with a long, drawn-out wail, a common vocal flourish in plans, believing it would convey the utter agony of his lovelorn heart. A few moments of silence followed, broken only by the mournful drone of the viol. Then the window slowly opened, and Lady Mathilde herself appeared, her face pale in the dim light. Willem's heart leaped. She was moved. She understood. But her expression was not one of tender appreciation. It was one of profound concern verging on alarm. "Master Willem," she called down, her voice soft but tinged with worry. Are you well? Has someone passed? Has a great tragedy befallen your family?" Her brow was furrowed with genuine distress. Willem blinked. "Lady Mathilde," he began, "I sing of my love for thee. My heart is truly dead, for it lives only in your absence." He gestured dramatically at his chest, fully expecting her to grasp the poetic metaphor. But Lady Mathilde was still looking at him with an expression of deep sympathy, almost pity. "Master Willem," she said, her voice gentle, "your lament was most moving, but my understanding of such songs is that they are for the departed. I assumed, with such profound sorrow, that a dear family member or a beloved friend had passed into God's embrace. I was prepared to offer my condolences." She paused, her gaze lingering on his face. "Indeed, I was preparing to send a servant to inquire about the nature of this terrible grief that possesses you." Willem's dramatic posture crumbled. His carefully constructed display of suffering had been interpreted as a declaration of personal tragedy, not romantic devotion. He stammered, trying to explain that no one had died, that his heart was merely poetically dead, not literally. Lady Mathilde, however, seemed only to grow more confused, her expression shifting from concern to mild bewilderment. A brief, awkward silence stretched between them. I apologize for the misunderstanding, Lady Mathilde," Willem finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. The viol player, sensing the abrupt shift in mood, quietly put down his instrument. Lady Mathilde, with a small, polite nod, closed her window. Willem was left standing in the silent street, his profound plan having conveyed only confusion and a sense of impending doom rather than the ardent love he intended. For weeks afterwards, whenever he encountered Lady Mathilde, she would inquire about his family's health, gently expressing her hope that his recent sorrows had abated. His serenade had not won her heart, but it had earned him a reputation as a man prone to dramatic, and often misplaced, public grieving. Number 3. The Rival's Revenge. The annual summer festival in the bustling city of Augsburg was in full swing, a vibrant tapestry of music, feasting, and chivalric games. Among the many knights vying for attention was Sir Roderick, a proud and handsome warrior from a northern duchy, and his sworn rival, Baroness Giselle's cousin, Sir Lothar, a local nobleman. Both men were infatuated with Lady Isolde, the Duke's daughter, known for her grace and her discerning eye. Sir Roderick, confident in his vocal talents and his lute playing, decided to serenade Lady Isolde. He composed a complex virelai, a form of medieval French lyric poetry, set to music filled with florid praise and subtle challenges to his rival. He rehearsed it tirelessly. What he did not know was that Sir Lothar had heard whispers of his plan and had concocted a subtle yet devastating sabotage. The night of the serenade arrived. The festival grounds were still lively, but the Duke's residence was a quieter, more exclusive affair. Sir Roderick, dressed in a tunic of deep blue velvet, positioned himself beneath Lady Isolde's window, a small, intricate harp cradled in his arms. He had spent months learning to play the harp, believing its rich, pure tones would be more evocative than a lute. The air was cool, carrying the faint sounds of distant merriment. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and nerves. As Roderick began to pluck the strings, a truly dreadful noise erupted from the courtyard behind him. It was the sound of a dozen pigs, squealing and grunting in a cacophony of porcine distress. The noise was so loud, so utterly unromantic, that Roderick's delicate heart melody was entirely drowned out. He faltered, his fingers freezing on the strings. He looked over his shoulder, bewildered. There, in the dim light, was a large, hastily constructed wooden fence, and behind it a chaotic herd of swine, seemingly stampeding in their enclosure. The Duke's pigsty, usually located far from the residential quarters, had been inexplicably relocated right next to Lady Isolde's private garden entrance. Before Roderick could recover, a small dark shadow darted from the bushes near his feet. It was a dog, a lean, scruffy mongrel that had apparently been trained for a very specific task. It snatched at the hem of Roderick's velvet tunic, tugging fiercely. Roderick, startled, stumbled backwards, losing his balance. He tripped over an unseen root, and the harp, still clutched in his hands, tumbled with him. It landed with a sickening crunch, the delicate wooden frame splintering, and several strings snapping with a series of mournful twangs. The pigs, seemingly emboldened by the dog's antics, continued their deafening chorus. Dog, having achieved its goal, released Roderick's tunic and trotted off into the darkness, its tail wagging. From Lady Isolde's window, a light flickered on. The window opened, and Lady Isolde herself appeared, her brow furrowed in confusion. Her gaze swept over the scene. The grunting pigs, the struggling knight on the ground, the shattered harp. Before she could speak, a smug voice called out from the darkness of the Duke's garden. "My dear Sir Roderick, it seems your serenade has attracted a most appreciative, if unconventional, audience." Sir Lothar emerged from the shadows, a faint, unreadable smile on his lips. He was carrying a small, empty sack, which he casually tossed behind a rosebush. It was later rumored that Lothar had paid the Duke's pig-keeper a considerable sum to temporarily relocate the pigsty, and had instructed a servant to release a specially trained dog at the crucial moment, a trick he had learned from a visiting performer. Lady Isolde, observing the scene, her initial confusion replaced by a knowing look, simply shook her head. She glanced from the shattered harp to the grunting pigs, then to the unrepentant Sir Lothar, and finally to the humiliated Sir Roderick, who was now awkwardly trying to pick up the broken pieces of his instrument. She did not speak. She simply closed her window, the soft click echoing in the chaos of the pigsty. Sir Roderick, his face flushed with a combination of anger and shame, glared at Sir Lothar. You scoundrel," he hissed. Lothar merely chuckled. "My dear Sir Roderick, a true musician must be prepared for any challenge, even one from nature itself, and perhaps a different instrument might be more suited to your talents." He turned and sauntered away, leaving Roderick amidst the grunting pigs and the splintered remains of his grand romantic gesture. His serenade had not only failed but had become a public spectacle, ensuring that his rival Sir Lothar would have ample material for mockery at the Duke's feast the next day and for many weeks to come. The story of Sir Roderick and the pigs became a cautionary tale among the knights of Augsburg. Number 2. The Tone-Deaf Minstrel. In the small, tightly knit community of Avignon, a thriving center of artistic and religious life in the late 14th century, lived Monsieur Etienne, a wealthy merchant of silks. Etienne, despite his sharp mind for commerce, was utterly devoid of musical talent. He was, however, Deeply smitten with Mademoiselle Gabrielle, the daughter of a prominent notary, Gabrielle was known for her exquisite taste in music and her patronage of wandering minstrels and local composers. Etienne, foolishly believing that sheer earnestness could overcome any lack of skill, decided to serenade her himself. He had acquired a new lute, finely crafted, and had painstakingly memorized a popular French ballade, a complex poetic and musical form, a tune about everlasting love and beauty. He chose a particularly intricate piece by Guillaume de Machaut, a celebrated composer of the era whose work was highly respected. The chosen night was dark and still, perfect for a secret, romantic overture. Etienne, dressed in his finest tunic, stood beneath Gabrielle's shuttered window. He clutched the beautiful lute, his fingers trembling. He knew, deep down, that his voice was a grating monotone, and his lute playing amounted to little more than a series of clumsy plucks and strums. But his desire to impress Gabrielle, to show her his passion, overruled his common sense. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began. The first few notes were, to put it mildly, tortured. The strings, intended to produce a melody, instead emitted a series of discordant buzzes and thuds. His voice, meant to be tender, emerged as a loud off-key bellow. He attempted the intricate melodic turns of Macat's ballade, but each note was a struggle, flat when it should have been sharp, sharp when it should have been flat. He tried to sustain notes, but his breath gave out, resulting in truncated, gasping phrases. He sang about the sun's gentle kiss, but his voice made it sound like a dying swan. He sang about the morning dew, but the sound conjured images of a cat caught in a trap. He was oblivious to the horror he was inflicting. His eyes were still closed, lost in the romantic fantasy he was attempting to create. Pressed on, his forehead beaded with sweat, his fingers cramping as he tried to force them into the proper positions. The music became less a melody and more a series of random, painful noises. Complex rhythm of the ballade completely disappeared, replaced by an erratic, arrhythmic thumping. Suddenly, a light flickered on in Gabrielle's window. Etienne's eyes flew open. He saw a shadow moving behind the shutters. She was awake. She was listening. He poured even more of his off-key passion into the final verse, ending with a climactic, jarring crash of plucked strings and a prolonged, warbling note that sounded less like a lover's ardent cry and more like someone choking on a fishbone. Then the shutters slowly, almost cautiously, opened. Mademoiselle Gabrielle appeared, her face illuminated by a small lantern. Her expression was not one of tender interest, nor even of mild amusement. It was a look of pure, unadulterated pain. Her eyes were wide, her mouth slightly agape, as if she were enduring some intense physical discomfort. She looked like a person who had just bitten into a rotten apple or had a tooth pulled without anesthetic. "Monsieur Etienne?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Are you unwell?" Her eyes flickered to the shattered musical instrument in his hands. He had, in his zealous attempt at a final flourish, managed to pull one of the lute strings free from its peg, and it dangled mournfully. "I confess," she continued, her voice gaining a touch of bewildered frankness, "I thought a cat was being tortured, or perhaps a rogue blacksmith was attempting to forge iron outside my window. Your performance was singularly unique." Etienne, his face burning with humiliation, stammered, "Mademoiselle Gabrielle, I sing of my love for you. My heart pours forth in this melody." He gestured grandly at the lute, which now looked less like a musical instrument and more like a broken piece of firewood. Gabrielle's eyes widened further. That was a love song. She looked genuinely perplexed, as if he had just explained the intricacies of theoretical physics in a language she did not comprehend. She paused, then with a polite but firm tone added, "Monsieur Etienne, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, I must confess that the sound was rather distressing my sleep, and indeed my very ears are quite delicate." She then gently, but definitively, closed the shutters, plunging the window back into darkness. Etienne stood there, alone in the quiet street, his broken lute dangling from his hand. The silence that followed his disastrous serenade was deafening, broken only by the sound of a distant dog barking, seemingly in response to the memory of his musical assault. His grand, romantic gesture had not only failed, but had actively repelled its intended recipient. For months afterwards, whenever Monsieur Etienne was mentioned in social circles, a knowing glance would be exchanged, and a subtle, almost imperceptible shudder would pass through the room. His musical talent became a whispered legend, a cautionary tale for any aspiring lover lacking an ear for melody. Number 1. The parental interruption catastrophe. The small village of Montaigne, nestled in the heart of rural France, was a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Young Pierre, the blacksmith's apprentice, had fallen head over heels for Marie, the baker's daughter. Marie, with her rosy cheeks and bright eyes, was known for her cheerful disposition and her strict, unyielding father, Master Jean, a man who valued order and propriety above all else. Pierre, despite his humble origins, dreamed of winning Marie's heart, and he decided upon a serenade, a common enough practice among the village youth, though usually undertaken with great stealth. He borrowed a worn rebec from an itinerant musician, and, with a heart full of hope and a stomach full of nerves, waited for the deepest part of the night. It was shortly after midnight. A sliver of moon cast long shadows across the cobbled lane. Pierre, clutching the rebec, positioned himself beneath Marie's small, shuttered window, directly above the bakery. He had composed a simple, heartfelt tune, a humble lament about his love for her, devoid of the complex metaphors of courtly literature, but sincere in its rustic charm. He took a deep breath, his hands sweating, and began to play. The rebec produced a reedy, slightly off-key sound, but it was earnest. He began to sing, his voice a nervous whisper. Then, growing a little louder, "Oh, Marie, my sweet, my guiding star, beyond the forge, my heart is where you are." He was barely through the first verse when a deep, rumbling cough echoed from directly beneath him. Pierre froze his fingers, faltering on the rebec strings. His blood ran cold. The bakery. Master Jean slept in the room directly below Marie's, or so the village gossip claimed. Pierre had assumed the old man would be a heavy sleeper. He had assumed wrongly. A window directly below Marie's, which Pierre had foolishly overlooked, creaked open. A formidable head, crowned with a nightcap, emerged. It was Master Jean, the baker. His eyes narrowed, his expression as sour as forgotten dough. He was a man of immense physical presence, his arms thick from years of kneading dough, and he carried a rolling pin, gripped like a club. He squinted into the darkness. "Who in the blazes is that?" he boomed, his voice echoing through the quiet village. "And what ungodly racket are you making outside my daughter's window?" Pierre, caught completely off guard, stammered, unable to form a coherent response. He looked like a startled rabbit caught in a snare. He knew Master Jean was not a man to be trifled with. Village tales spoke of lads who had attempted similar romantic overtures and had spent a week nursing bruised egos and sore backsides. Master Jean, recognizing the silhouette of the young blacksmith's apprentice, let out a snort of disbelief. "Pierre, is that you? Have you lost your senses, boy? Serenading my Marie like a common troublemaker?" He brandished the rolling pin, the moonlight gleaming off its well-worn surface. "Do you have any idea what time it is? Honest folk are sleeping, and that caterwauling, it sounds like a dying badger." Pierre's face burned. He glanced frantically up at Marie's window, which remained stubbornly shut. He wished the earth would swallow him whole. His attempt at a romantic gesture had backfired spectacularly, transforming into a public scolding by the very man whose approval he needed. Master Jean, seeing Pierre's mortification, did not relent. "And what is that instrument? A rebec? You sound like a banshee in a barrel. If you want to impress my daughter, you need to learn to bake a proper loaf, not make such a deplorable noise. Get home, boy, before I come out there and teach you a real tune with this rolling pin." He raised the rolling pin menacingly. Pierre, utterly defeated, mumbled a hurried apology, dropped the rebec, and fled into the night, the baker's booming voice and the rhythmic clack of the rolling pin against the windowsill echoing behind him. The sound of Master Jean's indignant bellow had already roused several other villagers, whose windows now slowly opened, curious faces peering out to witness the spectacle. Marie's window remained closed, offering no sympathy, no understanding. Pierre's serenade had not only failed to win Marie's heart, but had instead earned him the formidable wrath of Master Jean and the unwanted attention of the entire village. For weeks afterward, whenever Pierre passed the bakery, Master Jean would offer a pointed glare, and the village children would sometimes hum a mocking off-key tune, a harsh reminder of the night the blacksmith's apprentice tried to serenade the baker's daughter, only to face the full force of a father's furious rolling pin-wielding disapproval.